this stage, if we're going to get it done before Friday, it's going to be, I'm going to have to do it, and I don't know if I'm going to have time. I've got my truck torn down and I've rented a transmission jack, so I'm feeling the urgency. Like every day I have it, it's another $30. So so I've got some pressure that I need to get that back in. I have the transmission down. I'm in front of the seal, so hopefully this afternoon I can get that seal out, new seal replaced. I'm hoping I can do that, and then so that maybe by Tuesday night I might be able to have the transmission back in. I'm really banged up and sore, but it's
So I'll be down here tomorrow.
okay. Do you want to come down here, or do you want to? Because I was thinking that we'd probably swing by and snag you on the way out.
I got the cheapest gas.
Oh, okay. So let's just stay in. We'll see. I think it's a simple, you just have to take that doghouse off, and then everything is right there inside that. But taking the doghouse off is just like pain, and I know it's going to be a pain. And so that causes me to not want to do it. But it's all right there once you get it open, and pretty easy to get to so it needs plugs, wires, the sugar cap in order. Simple. Okay. If I magically get it done, say like Thursday night, then I'll let you know. But that would be the earliest that I could. That's the earliest I could start. Okay. Well, it's your account too, but we're running it upriver 20 miles back and forth on most Sundays, and you can feel it. And last week we could feel it more. It's just cutting out. So I just don't want to. So that's what's happening. I am looking forward to that, and then just to keep on your scope. Next Wednesday night, we have missionaries from and to Nicaragua. This would be the first mission family I've ever met. The Nicaragua. They are sent from Lancaster Baptist Church. We were watching their worship service this morning. And today's the first day of Spiritual Leadership Conference, which again, another year, and I'm not there. One of these years I'm going to go. But I just want to tell you, make you guys feel better that they also struggled with music this morning. So it's not just us. So yeah, they're on different keys. But it was good. So hopefully that'll be a bit. If you have your Bibles, it's been a few weeks since we looked at this, so let's do a little review. We'll start in 1 Samuel chapter 19 and verse 9. And the title of this lesson is Responding to Ruptured Relationships. 1 Samuel 19, 9. And I'll try to, part of the reason for doing this review is because I'm not 100% sure where we stopped in this. So if I am rushing through territory that we need to slow down for, y'all just wave the flag at me. But we'll try to get to where I think that we might be on this one, but I'm not completely sure. So 1 Samuel 19, verse 9, the Bible says, "And the evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, as he sat in his house with his javelin in his hand. And David played with his hand. And Saul sought to smite David even to the wall with the javelin, but he slipped away out of Saul's presence, and he smote the javelin into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night." So we have here the picture of where we're going to be headed to with this lesson, and that is the relationship between Saul and David. We quoted a statistic that said half of all relationships are replaced every 7 years because of something. most of us don't have friendships that are more than 7 years old that are active. It's not that you maybe don't still like people that you were friends with 7 years ago, but are you still active with them? Are you going out, getting coffee, still bowling with them, or whatever's the case? It often isn't the case, and we can see here in the life of Lighthouse Baptist Church how that I think we are legit on like version 6, and that's because we're only we're not quite 20 years old, and so so when you're rolling things over, I mean, it happens. It happens in every sort of life cycle. That's why a 5-year badge and a 10-year badge at work is a pretty big deal. If you can keep an employee around for 5 years, keep somebody around for 10 years. When we were at the Dodger game, they actually had someone had been working in the stadium, working for the Dodgers organization for 60 years. Really incredible. There were several people there that were more than 4 decades, and so that was pretty incredible. When I say several, here's an organization that no doubt employs hundreds and hundreds of people, and they were just recognizing folks that had been with them for more than 10 years, and there were about 20 people on the field that they were recognizing. So it's rare. I mean, it's not a very common occurrence. So those relationships do kind of turn over. Oftentimes, those breakups are painful and difficult to deal with, and oftentimes, the relationship is entirely the relationship is entirely unprovoked. Sometimes there's nothing that the offended party has done to end the relationship, and we see that in the case here with David. David did nothing wrong. He did nothing but try to support Saul, and was Saul's best soldier. He was Saul's best general. He was a personal friend to Saul, had gone out of his way to try to give aid and comfort to Saul. He was supportive of Saul, even though David had to wake up every morning knowing that he was better than Saul. David, for most of his time with Saul, knew that he was the anointed to be the king of Israel. David never said a word about it. He didn't act like that. He didn't walk around, pompous and all this sort of stuff. He just carried out his business. That's an interesting place to be. But just to take this to a different thing, you can't be any kind of a leader if you're not if you're not a very good servant, if you're not a very good follower. It's a real struggle, and it's something that we find a lot of people. It's one of the frustrations that we have as Americans. It's also one of the frustrations that most employees have, is that we find that people are in positions of leadership around the country, whether it's corporate leadership or political leadership, that haven't served, and so that's why that you kind of should get a little bit of credit. You should get some credit if you've been in the military, and now then you're going to go for political service. That doesn't guarantee that you have right views, Senator Duckworth, but it does mean that you've at least done something, and that you've had an opportunity to serve. Yes. Yes.
And that is my biggest issue with the only people that serve currently in the Senate are guys who are
Yes.
very bad. Sorry.
Yep. You weren't downrange. And that's, I do think that's a big thing, and that's one reason. Like, I'll call names here. That's one of the reasons why, like, Nikki Haley scares the daylights out of me to be a leader of this country. She's very, very willing to send your sons and daughters to get shot to pieces, because she knows she'll never be on the other end of that barrel, and that is disgusting to me. And I think she's the worst person possible to be the president of this country, and that's saying a lot, because there's a lot of possibilities. But nevertheless, we haven't served, and so also if you don't have a boss that does sometimes pick up trash around the grounds, or do something in the clean up the bathroom, or do some of the grunt work. In my office, it's set at the scanner. It's like the most menial job that we have is just to scan documents in, but what it does me good sometimes is that my CEO, I can look over there. I have the scanners in my view. If it's running, I hear it. And my boss will come over and scan documents on occasion. that means a lot to me. He's not too good to do the stuff that I hate doing, and that matters. It matters in a lot of organizations that bosses don't do that, and then it causes this frustration. So anyway, that was a tangent on leadership, not necessarily about relationships, but I knew it was a tangent. Okay. Remember that Saul and David were very, very close, and very quickly, we looked at the scripture before, but Saul's whole thing started to change when a couple of things had occurred. Samuel had told Saul that God was going to pull the kingdom from him. And then they go to this battle, and David rakes. He goes out there, and he's just slaughtering dudes, and Saul does too. Saul has a good day. David has like an exceptional day. They get to town, and the women are singing praises, and Saul has killed his thousands, and Saul's like, yeah, but he killed my thousands. And David has killed his 10,000s, and Saul's whole thing goes boom. Now, they hadn't said anything negative against Saul. They hadn't said that David's better than Saul. They were just reciting the facts. Saul didn't like the facts. And remember that facts don't care about your feelings. And so the women were drinking Saul's tears. But this was a kind of a what? Yeah, it was pretty salty. But maybe in a different way. So this whole thing begins to break Saul's little ego, and he had always been this way. Saul had always been very insecure, and was never one to really understand that sometimes having people around you that are better than you makes you look better. Also, we're going to talk about leadership for a minute. Bosses also should not mind to have people working for them who are better than them. Coaches shouldn't mind to have players that can do things that they can't do. It's a good thing if you are able to see someone exceed you, excel you. That doesn't make you less. In fact, it makes you more. That you're able to push someone higher. And but a lot of people are insecure about this, and so then that doesn't translate into their relationships. In our individual relationships, if we're truly loving people, our friends or spouses, then we are wanting best for them. So oftentimes in our relationships, what's wrong is we're wanting what's best for me. And if that's the case, then we won't let someone get whatever that means, attain whatever that means, physically or positionally, whatever the thing, if that means that would exceed us, and or that it would cost us something to see that happen. So I know we're going to have testimony from Chavez family today, but Janelle has personal aspirations, things that she wants to do, so going to school, going to class, well, that takes some family sacrifice to get that done, but it's no feeling like a sacrifice because she's loved, and so go achieve what you want to do, and at the end it'll be better for all of us. Okay, so that's good, so that's so there's always that piece, but you got to go through it to get to it, and so that's a loving relationship. We have a lot of relationships that crumble because we're not willing to sacrifice it, even for a little while, our personal comfort, our personal things to see our supposed loved one go on and excel and exceed. And this was the case with Saul. And so he was a very, very poor leader. If you're reading John Maxwell books, he'll often talk about the disparity between Saul and David, and Saul's poor leadership versus David's exceptional leadership. I don't know what this is, but it's weird. Get a new review. I'm a reviewer. How about that, sure? Okay, so hopefully it's not 1 star. All right, so this is what's going on, this slight. So there was a breaking point. Oftentimes, breaking points in relationships do not happen overnight. Whether this is friendships, marriages, businesses, usually the fissures are relatively seem insignificant or small at first, but they build over time. And as the seismic plates shift, then those fissures begin to open up. And then there's a final day when the earthquake happens, and it seems like that suddenly everything fell apart. But in reality, you could trace back and find that things didn't actually suddenly fall apart, that there were problems that were seated in the relationship from a long time ago. This was the case with Saul and David. Saul didn't immediately go attack David when the women began singing those songs, but it created a seed. It put a problem. There was a sweet pea under the mattress that just eventually began to show until finally one day he hucks a javelin at him. It was gradual, but there was a straight line to it. And this is oftentimes the case in relationships that fall apart. Oftentimes when things fall apart in a church, it's because of this. Some slight happened. Somebody sat in somebody else's seat, or somebody voted a certain way, didn't get their way, and at first everything seemed like it was okay, but then just over time, that just begins to fester and to build, and then boom, it happens. And you'll think, oh, it was just because of this. That's not what happened. There was problems long ago that caused that break point to even be possible. All right. We have biblical examples of this with Paul and Barnabas. Remember, Paul and Barnabas go on their first missionary mission, maybe one of the most successful missionary missions ever to be executed. Paul did go on at least two others. There's controversy if he ever went on a fourth. But he goes on at least two other missionary endeavors, and they are successful. But Paul and Barnabas was dynamite. They are breaking ground, and they are going to places unknown, and they were just doing things that were never really truly duplicated since that time. But yet their relationship is able to break apart, all because at one time there is this conversation that happens around John Mark, and John Mark leaves, and they go ahead and finish out that first missionary journey, and they have all kinds of success all through the end of that first missionary journey. But finally there's a break, and it all comes to the surface over this disagreement about John Mark, and they never work together again. Paul, at the end of Paul's life, he doesn't even mention Barnabas. Now, I think that they did get some sort of reconciliation, but it's weird. Barnabas outlived Paul by every expectation, and Paul doesn't talk about him at the end. It's weird. And so and then you know what happens, you get Paul and Silas and Barnabas and Mark, and they both go on and have great success after, but you see that even among some of the greatest Christians that have ever lived, that these kind of breaks can happen. And so whenever we see breaks that happen in our churches today, among our fellowships today, we think, oh man, we are so far apart from the first century Christians. Not really. They had big breakups too, and they had big fissures also, and some of that was really intended by God. God used both sides of that. Now, it shouldn't have happened as ugly as it did, but God used both of the breaks to allow it to happen. Also, another point is kind of speedy here. Maybe I'm not going as fast as I think. Is it's okay to break a relationship for the honor of God. Sometimes we feel like that we have an obligation to continue relationships, even when those relationships are not pleasing to God, and we know that they're not pleasing to God. It's okay to break a relationship to honor God. God's honor is above all, should always be above all. There's not any, it's not going to be pleasant, it's not going to be comfortable, but it's okay to do that. And we talked about last time how the differences in maturity levels, differences in love can cause this to happen. I think I gave you an example once. I was told that, you're on a different relationship, maturity level than the other person, and we spend a lot of time having fun at the expense of men and young men. How that you're not even like a full-grown adult, so you're at least 26 years old. All right, so And that's an old stat. It might be like more, 36 now. Huh? Yeah, but college class are probably lagging behind. I mean, you still get to vote when you're 18, and I think that should be up. So, how many 18-year-old people know how to write a check? How many? Well, I don't write mini checks, but you should at least know what it is.
How many 35, 40-year-old people use a check?
Yeah. But then they get to vote about what's best for the economy. So, so that's kind of tragic. All right. I just asked Google. So then, sometimes whenever we are in this place where a relationship is sliding, it's souring, something's wrong, we get a frustration that is stuck in the middle. What do I do? How do I navigate this relationship? One thing, if possible, not every relationship will fall into this category, but remember, if possible, remember the good. Some relationships should not be salvaged. We can't think about when people are injured, when there's crime that has occurred from one person to the other, there's no obligation to have to repair that relationship to the status it was before. Even the Bible allows fornication, all kinds of things that might not necessarily be a crime, but it still is it's an injury to someone, and so that's definitely allowed. The Bible's not explicit about abuse, but the Bible, there's no indication that is ever permitted to be okay just to go beating up the partner. I support that. Abuse is a very acceptable, biblically based reason to go to part. That shouldn't have to be accepted. Some sort of resolution, great. And let's talk about it in that sense. Let's especially talk about it in the sense when it comes to friendships. Try to remember the good. And I'll use a silly example with this. You guys know, it's football season. Some people still care. With my particular tortured fan base of the Arkansas Razorbacks, we remember a few years ago when we had a coach that promised that our offense was going to be left lane hammer down, and instead they were riding in the right lane, half on the shoulder with their blinker on. It was a terrible experience, and the recruiting staff everything was depleted, and we were the laughingstock of America. And then we got a great coach who cried whenever we hired him because he was so proud to have the job and he cared so much for the job. And that really felt good. And so that's still our coach, and for some reason he can't figure out how to beat BYU. He looked bad against Kent State. But for those of us in this fan group, we should remember the good. It hasn't always been bad, and it probably won't always be bad again. So if we can try to remember the good, then it puts things in a lot better perspective. With David, one thing that he continued to do with Saul is he continued to remember who Saul was, that he was God's anointed. And until God removed Saul, David wasn't going to remove him. He had multiple opportunities, but he did not. David did continue to remember the good that was possible to remember with Saul. And whenever it became impossible for David to honor Saul very much, David honored Jonathan, his friend, David's son. And after Jonathan and Saul were both killed, David honored Mephibosheth, Saul's last remaining son. David remembered the good that would happen with Saul as much as he could. Sometimes when a relationship fractures, we only focus upon the negative ending, and it sours all of the good things that truly were good previously in the relationship. We've had people leave church And sometimes we're really sad for them to leave. And so we can only think about 2020 and 5 families left suddenly and abruptly. And sometimes in my mind, I can only think about those families that just took off and left. But I have to be thankful for when they were here, because it was also those families, mostly those families, who were here whenever we moved into this building. And without them, we wouldn't have been able to see some of the things happen. Without the John and Vicki Crafts, without the Amanda Mates and John and Rolene Russells, their leaving definitely hurt, and we miss them, but can't forget the good things that happened, with them here too. So so we have to think about that along the way. And it was just a few weeks ago that someone was up talking, and they referenced, it was the Fort Myers, and they referenced Randy Howard. And how long's it been since Randy and Debbie have been here? And so, see, there's good, and don't think that just because something bad happened at the end, that nothing ever really was as good as it seemed. That is the mirage. And so David tried to remember the good. Also, don't force others to take your side. This can be a very frustrating thing, because oftentimes when a relationship breaks down, there's a desire to pull army to your side. You see this happen sometimes in really nasty child custody cases and things like that, and try to recruit people to the side. You don't have to do that. This happens constantly on social media. People are constantly trying to plead their case to everyone online, try to get as many likes to their feelings as they possibly can. It creates an endorphin. There is an addictive element to that. It says, well, I feel a certain way. I want to get as many people feel the way that I do, and to agree with my side. And that there's actually an addictive thing to all of that. And it's actually what it does is this army building is not a biblical approach. We are to let God get the vengeance for us. If we go out and try to recruit our army to get our vengeance against those who have offended us, then we'll get the reward that we get on earth. God won't fight for you. If you want God to fight for you, stay quiet. Continue to live an honorable life. Continue to have admirable character, to do things right. Let God speak for you. That's hard to do. I'm telling you, as a passionate, loudmouth man, it is hard to let God fight for me, especially when people lie about me, or they discredit me, or I don't get the respect that I feel like that I've earned. It's really, really hard. But David did not go try to recruit people against Saul. He never formed a rebellion against Saul. People did go to David. It's interesting the style of people that went to David. The broke, the outlaws, the destitute. They went to David, but when they went to David, all they ever did was protect him and sometimes fight on Saul's behalf secretly. And they never ever went and fought against Saul. That did not happen. You can see a vast difference between that and then things that happen today in the media, in a legal case. You impeach me, we're impeaching you, da-da-da-da-da, back and forth, armies, and so that we're more into camps than we've ever been. There's more tribalism than we've ever seen. And you killed my dad, I'm killing your dad and your mom. Well, you killed my dad and your mom, I'm killing your dad's dad and grandma and your kids and your nephews, and just back and forth, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And there's more of that than there's ever been, I think, in this country. It's really, really rampant. And but because somebody makes an accusation, against you, if it's not true, then it shouldn't stick. Don't live a life in a way when someone makes an accusation against you that people say might have happened. It's one of my big problems with one of the big political characters in our stage today is that, yeah, a lot of the stuff that he's being accused of, he may not have done, but he's lived such a trashy life that how could you possibly defend him, his character? It's no defense. And so it makes it really, really hard to try to say, well, let's just talk about policies. While he's signing women's chests the other day, just enforcing all of the negative things that have been about him. Is he different? No. And so it's really, but David, at least to this point in his life and in his career, he later dirties it up. He later makes some big mistakes with Bathsheba, massive mistakes. But to this point in his career, he had not done that. He formed no army. And recall that even whenever David made huge mistakes, he did not take it, here's Absalom, and Absalom has rebelled up against David. David didn't charge in against Absalom. He begged for Absalom's life. He sought for as peaceful as possible resolution to that whole debate. And so really interesting, really different than what we often see whenever someone offends, and so the next thing to do is to go try to tear down and to attack. This is not a biblical way to do it. Notice also, if we're going to go to Paul and Barnabas, where do you ever see Barnabas attacking Paul? In the public. Where do you see Paul attacking Barnabas in the public? It doesn't happen. They didn't go to the newspapers. They didn't put it in the Baptist Voice. They didn't go into the Flaming Scorch. They didn't put it into any of these other, into these publications. It doesn't make it into the Bible. I don't think Paul's preaching sermons against John Mark. He's not doing it. It didn't happen. And so this is I think something that we should pay attention to about how that when people were harmed, how that they took advantage of it. Be respectful. You get what you give. 1 Samuel chapter 26. You're in 1 Samuel already. I didn't write down the verse, but I think I want to be around verse 13. David's here kind of found out where Saul is at. Saul's out on a campaign to try to kill David. David's doing these maneuvers to avoid Saul, and at the same time, he's taking down the enemies of the nation, which is kind of incredible. Verse 13, and David went over to the other side and stood on top of a hill far off, a great distance between them. And David cried to the people and to Abner, the son of Ner, saying, answerest thou not, Abner? And Abner answered and said, who art thou that criest to the king? And David said to Abner, art thou not a valiant man? And who is like unto thee in Israel? Wherefore then hast thou not kept thy lord the king? For there came one of the people and to destroy thy lord. So notice what David is here. So what's happened is David snuck in, and he's been close enough to Saul he could have killed him. And the people who are near to Saul, who should have been protecting him, they were sleeping, and they did not protect Saul. David is giving this guy the riot act because he didn't do his job to protect Saul, who's trying to kill David. Okay, so we talk about respect. Verse 16. This thing is not good that thou hast done. As the Lord liveth, you are worthy to die, because you have not kept your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the cruse of water that was at his bolster. And Saul knew David's voice and said, is that thy voice, my son David? And David said, it is my voice, O Lord, my Lord, O King. So just that's enough to read to see that here, David's being attacked, but he did not attack. It's kind of interesting how that went. So this respectful. You get what you give. This is a major problem with our communities today and with our culture today, and it goes into churches. It's easy to be critical. It's easy to throw spears. But if you want respect and if you want grace, if you want mercy from time to time, you got to give those things. You got to give mercy to get it. You got to give grace to get it. You got to give respect to get it. A lot of times people are demanding respect because of the position that they hold, but that doesn't cut it. If it ever did cut it, and there's people that think that maybe generationally it may have been enough to throw down the business card. It's not enough anymore for sure. Gen Xer, I mean, here's me. I mean, my generation's, most of the presidents, CEOs and stuff, and we couldn't care less what your title is on your business card. We want to know what you do. Okay, and so that's and you think that we're bad, wait till these next ones come up. They don't care. They want to see what you do. How do you perform? Is your performance meeting expectations? So what you've got a title, it doesn't make you better than me. And so this is a real challenge. It's been a challenge for me most of my career. And because I've had folks ahead of me until pretty recently that were of a generation that thought putting down a business card would quiet me, and it never has. So that's it's a tough. But if you want me to respect and follow you, you're going to give me some respect too. I'm going to earn it. I feel like I should have to earn it, but at the same time, you get what you give. Walking around like you're the king of the world will not get respect from most people. Don't accept everything that you hear. Look, don't even accept everything that you see nowadays. Did you guys see the deal of, it's a pretty funny meme that started internet circles this week, and it cracked me up because I think John Fetterman is an embarrassment to our country. But it's a AI generated thing of Rand Paul sitting in a bathrobe and barefoot, and said, that Rand Paul went to the Senate floor wearing a bathrobe and barefoot to protest the Senate's relaxed dress policies, which is an abomination. But it was AI. It wasn't. And Rand Paul responds to it funny and says, "I said no pictures," but it's not real. It didn't really happen. Yes.
I'm going to give you one a lot closer to home, with a lot more damage.
Okay.
We had the fire at Georgia Pacific about 10 days ago. There were people putting up videos that they had taken from other sites and other places, other times, stating that they were there at the fire. One of them showed the entire building on fire. One of them showed all the paper machines on fire. None of that occurred. It never broke containment. It never got a paper roll on fire.
Wow.
None of it. There were no injuries in the fire. Yet there were people putting out stories that said that there were hundreds.
Goodness. Yeah. So. Just to get a few likes that in a minute you're going to have to know is going to be discovered as false. But it's also something that's been discussed recently about in the news cycle. It used to be kind of getting the scoop was a big deal. You wanted to be first. But now you notice that everyone oftentimes lead with the same news scoop, and it'll be across multiple platforms and companies all at the same time. So you have these major drops. And then you find out that information was false and wrong, but it doesn't matter because the damage has already been done. It's been broad spread, and most people don't follow up to find out if that news was accurate. So all you have to do is lead with a big lie, a big hit at the beginning, and then it doesn't matter afterward. So that does happen that's a pretty big scale around here. I mean, that's countywide. That's one of the biggest engines in our county, and then and so you do a hit like that, but it also happens in our relationships, friendships. Well, so and so said so. doesn't make it true. Just because Bill said to Ed this sort of thing, that doesn't make it fact. It just doesn't make it fact. So verify things. Don't accept everything you hear from friends or foes. In every case, prefer Christ. We have to read everything through the lens of how does Jesus teach about this? And we don't have to get to this hypothetical lens of what would Jesus do maybe if he was here. We can actually go and find situations like this that we can find in the Bible. How was that treated? Just like we're doing here, dissecting with Saul and David. See how applicable this is across many, many relationships, and we're not drawing some sort of hypothetical lines that may never come to fruition. So just either friend or foe, don't accept everything that you hear. Don't accept everything that you see, especially nowadays. Just because it's video doesn't make it true. So be very, very careful with all of those things. Prefer Christ. Make your relationship with Christ the number one focus. Be grateful for those who help us, but committed to few. This is a big deal. Be grateful for every relationship that you have, especially those that help you along your way. But there's no reason to be committed to every relationship that we encounter in our life. Marilee was playing with Autumn this morning and playing with the Siri, and Marilee says, "How many people are in the world?" And Siri says, 8 billion people. Can you believe that? Almost 8 billion people in this world? There's a lot of relationships to be had. And we don't need to be committed to that many relationships. The relationships that we should be committed to definitely should be those that bring us closer to Christ. All our hope in one relationship is a recipe for disaster. If your entire life plan is based upon a relationship with some specific relationship with one person or one group of people, then you are set up to get wrecked. I'm going to tell you, people will let you down over and over again. Not because that they're bad people, but because they are people. People will let you down. And if you're putting all of your eggs into that basket, that this is going to be what makes my life happy, you're in trouble. These words are not often enough said. There's just one. Look, you can have a happy married life for 50 years. You know what you'll find in that relationship? Disappointments. You're going to find struggles. You might have had a best friend for 50 years. But you know what you've experienced during that relationship? Disappointments. You cannot put all of your hope into one person, one movement, or etc. You know how many people today have all their hope in a movement? Oh, we're going to go take over this. We're going to change the world, this thing. And all their hope is in that. You know, one rule that I've been trying to live by, I heard it once when I was younger, but it's become more impactful in my life more recently, is that you can't beat City Hall. And you know, if we gather up into these movements and we're going to go storm the City Hall like the Bastille, a lot of times you're going to come back bloody, beaten, defeated, and you'll begin to question your movement, begin to question your motives, begin to question your conviction, question those around you. It's a dangerous thing. But if we take off and we say, I'm going to follow Christ, and I'm going to put all of my eggs into that basket, everything around that, He'll give me the relationships that I need. Just like we heard from this pulpit last week from Sister Rauch. I'm just going to follow Christ. He'll give me the marriage that He wants me to have. He'll give me the ministry that He wants me to have. He'll do for me what He wants me to do in His timing. That's okay. Wow. wow. You know, that is, we need more of that. Christians, we need to live like that. Just to say, God will give me what I want. And what I don't have is because God doesn't want me to have it. I have a Ferrari if God says I need it. Please, God, give me a need. Let me find a ministry that I can serve you with a hyper-fast car. But I haven't found that one. And so I'm still alive. That is that I have hope, and obviously I haven't gotten to that ministry yet. I would drive it like it was stove. But you know, so He gives us what we need and keeps from us what we do not need. This is hard for us to accept, so anyway, I don't know if we got onto much new ground today. Did we? Okay. Even healthy relationships can pull you away from Christ. Quote, healthy. All right, we're done.